Hello, I'm James Harvey, the professor of music theory at the College of Southern Nevada with 5-Minute Music Theory, and this is the first in a series of videos on phrase structure. And let's talk about what constitutes a phrase. We've already discussed that cadences terminate phrases, so we can find the ends of phrases, and we know about inconclusive versus conclusive cadences, and that's really all that we need to know when we're leading into phrase structure. So we're going to talk in this video about the concept of antecedent and consequent. Antecedent and consequent. Sometimes you might hear different terminology. This is the most common. And antecedent is your question, followed by consequent, which is the end of the statement, the response to that question. So an antecedent phrase always has an inconclusive cadence. And the consequent phrase always has a conclusive cadence. And with these together, we have a nice strong statement because we have the question followed by the answer. Now, the first phrase form that we're going to talk about, which has antecedent and consequent phrases, is what's known as the period. Here's where things start to get a little bit confusing because we're going to use terminology that comes from English writing, but it's not going to exactly match because if you think about period in English, it's the end of a statement. Now, a period is actually a series of phrases. It's two phrases specifically, and the way I'm going to write these is by writing brackets down. When we use these brackets, these are used to indicate phrases, and you see there's two of them. Periods always have two phrases. There's the antecedent phrase, and there's the consequent phrase. And then underneath these brackets, we would usually write measure numbers, although we don't have measures to talk about here, so I'm just going to use this sort of as an abstract idea. Here's a really common example of the cadential formula for a period. We have two phrases, the first ending with an HC, second ending in a PAC, so that's a very inconclusive cadence followed by a very conclusive cadence. And what we're going to do is write two markings here. Notice I use lowercase letters. It's important because when you're dealing with phrases, you use lowercase letters. And these letters we'll talk about in a later video more specifically. But we have an A here and a B. So that means we have two completely separate phrases from each other. And then above all of this, I'm going to write another bracket and I'm going to write period, because this is a period. There's actually two types of periods, and actually we might be able to fit this in this video. When you have two phrases which are different from each other, like this, A and B, this is what's known as a contrasting period. A contrasting period, let's go in order. Contrasting means that the two phrases are different from each other, A and B. It means that they contain different material. They might have a few notes the same, but they're definitely different phrases. And then period is two phrases which have antecedent and consequent relationships. If we want to try writing a different kind of a period, and instead of a contrasting, we write the other type, which is known as a parallel period. Only thing we would need to change is this second phrase. We would write A, and we'd write a little apostrophe next to it, which means that it's A prime. What that means is that the phrase material, or the material that's used to construct these phrases, is very similar, or at least begins the same. They can't end the same because they have different cadences, so they can't both be A, because that would mean that they're exact carbon copies of each other. What this means is that the phrase material is very similar between these. They just have different cadences at the end. And these are parallel periods when you have the same letters. So let's go in order through we had a whole bunch of terms and concepts in this video. Antecedent and consequent relationship is a question and answer relationship, which phrases can have and tend to have most of the time. And the things that terminate phrases are cadences. A period is two phrases with an antecedent followed by a consequent phrase. It's never consequent antecedent, by the way, when it's just a single period. And then we have parallel and contrasting, which is the relationships of the two phrases to each other. Parallel periods have two of the same phrases, just with different cadences. Contrasting periods have two completely different phrases, yet they still have that antecedent and consequent relationships. I know that's a big mouthful and a lot to digest in one video, but hey, you can go back and look at it again, and we'll have a whole bunch of of supplemental material coming up in the next few months and years as you guys start to filter in your questions. Thanks.